Hello and welcome to the Questionable Album Club. I'm not sure what episode this is. We've had probably more failed episodes than we have successful episodes. I've got this is officially number 7. After a little bit of witting housekeeping here. After number 6 with the Dan Reed Network's album, The Heat was.
Yeah,
but it wasn't. We actually did record it. We spent a lot of time listening to it, a lot of time talking about it. But the technical issues were so comically dreadful. But it was kind of a bit sort of Dali, wasn't it? It was a bit beef art. I think we sort of thought about releasing it just as a sort of random piece of sonic art. But essentially, we gave Dan anyway, blah 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 blah. We all gave Dan Reed an average score of 25.2 out of 100. Looking at my leaderboard here, that puts it our 3rd worst. After Warlock is still the worst. Dolly Parton is still the 2nd worst, and so Dan Reed it's our 3rd worst. Anyway, today's episode is all about this was Owen's choice, and he suggested Saved by Bob Dylan, Bob Dylan's 20th studio album from 1980. Saved was the 3rd of Bob's Christian trilogy, which, well, these 3 records which were overtly Christian, which are Slow Train Coming was the first one, produced by Mark Knopfler, pardon me. This one was produced by, I've got it written down somewhere, so I've never heard of. And then Short of Love, which was ever so slightly, you could tell listening to Short of Love that he was slightly coming out of his Christian period. Looking this up on Wikipedia, of course, this got to number 3 in the UK, extraordinarily, in 1980, same year as the first Maiden album, and Heaven and Hell. So that was probably 1 and 2. This was 3. Recorded in Muscle Shoals studio. It's a gospel album. And I think that's enough backstory. Owen, you selected this. Can you please explain yourself and then tell us what you thought?
Excuse
everyone. Sorry, after saying that, we've got Marcus on the panel today. We've got Marcus King. Marcus.
Good evening, everybody.
We've got Steve Gibson.
Hello.
We've got Steve Webster.
Hi.
We've got Owen Oakeshaw, who's about to start talking. Me, Seb Hunter. Oh, for the first time ever, we are now, I think we're on YouTube because we've had so many failed platforms, hence all this chaos of missed episodes and so on. We've now got Zoom Pro, and this all seems to be working. I can see everyone, we can all hear each other, which is the first time this has ever happened. So it's all a bit miraculous so far, but we always fuck it up. So
more failed platforms than Donald Trump.
Ooh, a little bit of politics.
There, I managed to get him in.
There we go. You'll be delighted. Yeah. So what did you? So why and so forth.
So I'm not a Dylanologist, but I've sort of obviously, like most people on planet Earth, recognize him as being sort of a foundational presence in popular music culture. I've heard a few bits and bobs, as it were, and have slowly sort of educated myself a bit better in recent times. This particular album, I think I'm pretty sure, I'm not absolutely sure, but I think I heard it a long time ago. I would have been in my late teens. I think a chap called Jeff Reed, who's a mutual friend of mine and Seb's, and Steve Webster, in his bedroom, and I think he played it to me, and because he was sort of trying to indoctrinate me into a bit of Bob Dylan, or at least sort of share a little bit of his understanding of it. And it was done with that kind of slightly contemptuous, oh, this is Bob Dylan's Christian period. What an idiot. And I just heard a few bits of it. I seem to vaguely remember and thinking, oh, well, yeah, right, that's fair enough. That's a bit of a down period for Bob Dylan. Don't know much about him anyway. And then moving on. And so then, as you read and marinate yourself in, the general culture, you kind of become aware that he had this born again period. And he had a few albums in that period that were considered less than stellar. But he's had, obviously, for a character with a massive career, there are loads of kind of dubious albums that you could choose as kind of like poor albums. I mean, the first big one was the self-portrait, and after, you know, 1960s being the kind of the period of, you know, his opening gambit of, you know, hello everybody, I'm Bob Dylan, I'm the savior of the world sort of thing. And he basically released this album, which was a kind of a big finger up at everything, because he hated the whole idea of it. And so he's always doing this thing whereby he kind of turns around and says, right, I'm going to do something different. And you have to look at this period in that context, because he had this amazing renaissance in the mid-70s, and
are you talking about
had some kind of midlife crisis?
Owen,
hello,
talking about amazing renaissance in the mid-70s. Are you talking about Desire, Rolling Thunder?
Yeah. And Blood on the Tracks, principally. I mean, that's his big sort of fantastic 1970s album, which is amazing. I mean, just like does your head in. It's wonderful. But he was clearly going through a bit of a kind of a midlife crisis. He, you know, Blood on the Tracks is all about, well, if it's not about Chekhov, then it's certainly about him splitting up with Sarah Lones, and then obviously the big tour that kind of, you know, he was sort of probably drinking too much, and there was this whole idea, this feeling that he was kind of casting around, trying to find or rediscover the point of himself. And then he releases these 3 albums, and so I kind of, with that understanding of the backstory and sort of what the context is of these 3 albums, I sort of started listening to it. And thinking, you know, fascinating story in itself, that this kind of Minnesota Jewish kid who spent his formative years in New York, you know, in the early 60s, in a kind of very intellectual, sort of avant-garde sort of atmosphere, but rooted in, you know, American folk culture, from, you know, the Appalachians and the Delta blues and the whole lot. It's a really interesting twist in his story, basically becoming a born-again Christian. And I thought, wow, that is extraordinary. And all the way, you know, you have these top 40 albums of Bob Dylan, or top, you know, the ranked albums. This one has consistently done really badly, and it's got some terrible reviews left, right, and centre. And yet at the same time, it's had some pretty good reviews by quite a few, and more latterly as well. It's a lot of people have been reappraising it. So there's obviously a sort of, it's a contested space, the whole idea of actually his born-again Christian period, and also the quality of the albums, you know, thereunto. So I kind of listened to it with expecting to hate it, or to be feeling to feel vaguely contemptuous of it, and thinking, oh dear, this is not particularly good. And I, you know, with apologies to the whole premise of this particular podcast, I just completely loved it. I really surprised myself by actually thinking, this is fantastic. It's really kind of evanescent. It's got sort of, it's very, you know, it's got a bunch of musicians on it who, you know, they're really good at what they do. The Muscle Shoals studio, the rhythm section is, you know, it's legendary, and you've got a legendary producer, or 2 of them, who've, you know, done the rounds with Aretha Franklin and Wilson Pickett and all the rest of it. So, and it's an album that is unashamedly a gospel album, that when you kind of really listen to it, see what he's doing. Actually, it's not a very big leap, actually, from what he was doing, you know, early in his career, and then onwards, you know, with stuff with the band, you know, that kind of roots rock stuff, and then going into a kind of a very clear sort of African American sound, gospel sound, which obviously Elvis Presley did a lot of. And, you know, he's kind of, he's sort of placing his flag in that particular turf, and doing it from the point of view of somebody who has had some kind of revelatory moment through his own personal journey. And I was really surprised. I was just delighted by its directness, for somebody who has a kind of a voice that is shrouded in a sort of slight, I don't know what you might call it, a kind of skeptical, ironic enigma that is his kind of aesthetic calling card. Even when he's done so many kind of vernacular sort of songs and pseudo vernacular songs and lots of different voices in those songs, but his basic tone of voice, both lyrically and also what he sounds like, is a kind of, it's difficult to really get a handle on it, because he's obviously very oblique, very kind of cagey in lots of ways, and very verbose. Here he's totally direct. And hello.
Can I just interrupt? Sorry, just because you've been going on quite a long time. I just wanted to give everyone. I totally appreciate it. I just want to give word to other people. Apparently in the story goes that in 1978 in a hotel room in Tucson, Arizona, he sensed a presence in the room that could only be Jesus. Quoting Bob, he put his hand on me. I felt my whole body tremble. He said. So apparently that's what happened. But then Keith Richards apparently was extremely cynical about the whole project, and sort of said, "Yeah, he's the prophet of prophets," said Keith, which is, you know, pots and kettles. Marcus, are you a Dylan fan? You've never struck me as a Dylan fan.
No, I'm not at all. In fact, this is my my introduction to Bob Dylan. It's the first Bob Dylan album I've listened to from start to finish.
Like me with Queen, man. That was me with Queen when we did Hot Space. That was my.
There you go. Yeah, I mean, this is what the QAC is all about. Is breaking down barriers musically for us as a panel, and hopefully for some of our listeners too. Bob Dylan is one of those people that I've seen in this kind of upper echelon of modern music, and totally respect what he does. I watched the Rolling Thunder Review movie. I thought that was fantastic, but it just didn't tip me over into then immediately going and listening to one of his albums. I don't really know why, but it just never quite switched that light on for me. So I'm very grateful for the choice today for going through this, sticking on Saved. I was stumbling a little at the beginning because I was looking up the word evanescent and then pseudo vernacular from Owen's introduction. Those are the only two that I could manage to write down that quickly from his kind of verbal diarrhea. But well done, Owen, for the monologue. Thoroughly enjoyable, and it gave me a whole lot more information.
Marcus, I saw you actually writing stuff down. I didn't realize you were actually writing down the adjectives using to then look up to be able to.
I just thought they were amazing. They're words I want to. This is a whole learning day really for me. My vocabulary is broadening both musically and literally. So chapeau to you, Owen, on that one. Onto the album itself. Well, I suppose because this is QAC and, you know, we've got an internal track record now. We've got a standard of music that we've listened to, which generally has been on the lower end of the scale. You know, our marks are low across the board. So I was expecting this to be 100% nailed on Turkey. And there were most of the tracks I thought were awful. I mean, really just dire. And I'm not going to get into the sort of religious content. I just thought musically some really dire stuff. But within that, there were three which I thought were brilliant. We normally do our favourites a bit later, don't we, Seb? Shall I do it now or save them for a bit later?
I mean, if you thought everything else was dire, you might as well say that you like.
Well, yeah, I thought actually, like the first one, A Satisfied Mind. My notes say much better than I was expecting. That was just a good opener. And then number two, Saved, I thought was just knockout. And I was nearly got out of my rocking chair at this point. My notes, I put the band is on fire. I just thought musically the whole thing's going through. I like the surprise of hearing this poor quality voice doing gospel backed up by the gospel, because, you know, he is a genius. He's a great lyricist. His voice is terrible. I think everybody sort of knows that, and that's part of his charm. But where gospel has this fantastic range and expression and all the rest of it, and he's got his whiny, nasally croak over the top, that's kind of satisfying because it's not the cliche that you would expect. You know, there's other artists who will do a gospel album or a gospel track because they are conventional singers wanting to stretch themselves a bit, and this is different. It's like trying to do it's just a genre, a mismatch. You know, his tonal voice, his timbre of his voice with the music that's coming out. So I thought that was Saved was fantastic, and I really liked Pressing On as well. I really like this track. In fact, it's brilliant. It's a sort of piano ballad type thing. That was that was fab. So there's 3 tracks I'll probably dive into again tomorrow. Well, I'll save the negativity for a bit, for maybe later when we do our round 2. But that's my kind of initial overview.
So your first ever Dylan album, Marcus, you popped your cherry and you like 3 of them.
Yeah.
Very good. Webster, before we come to you, Gibson, Mr. Webster, you and Dylan, what's a quick little bit on you and Dylan, and then let's go straight into.
Okay. I have owned 2 albums, kind of like a greatest hits and Hard Rain randomly, which I absolutely loved, but it wasn't enough to take me into ever really heavily investing time or money in Dylan again. However, I've always found him lyrically a genius, but I found his songs always a little bit disappointing, a bit ploddy, there's nothing that's really sort of carried me away. And I think often he's saved by the genius of his lyrics and his storytelling, and as I think Owen said, the voices and the personas that he creates. But I think even that is taken away here, because there's kind of a cut and paste of a 1,000 gospel songs lyrics randomly scattered across 9 uniformly pretty boring songs. Well, there's some of them I felt like Marcus were they piqued my interest for a little while, but I was left very cold because I found the music boring before I even started to try and pull apart the content. And I think the danger of doing something like this, no matter obviously how, whether it comes from good intentions or whatever, is that you fall into just writing what everyone has already written before. And so yeah, for me it was this wasn't my favorite kind of re-entry point into Dylan at all.
Any particular highlights for you, Steve, before we move on to
actually with Marcus? I like the first track, Satisfied Mind. I thought that was nice, had some, there's some authenticity there in the Delta Blues stuff, and I thought Saved was good. I don't know why it put me in mind of Hot House Flowers, which is maybe not the kind of comparison
you think
you want. Other than that, no, not really. I mean, I just have this thing time and time again where there's this okay melody, okay, the songs are great, the structures are great, but then it's another verse. Really, I thought this might end at 3.5 minutes, but oh no, it's another. We're just kind of rolling over and over and over stuff. So no, it most of all, it really put me off. I would also, I don't know whether there's a special spot for this, but the harmonica in What Can I Do For You?
Yeah.
If anyone else has got notes on that, then
Do you not like that?
I think
that's the only time that Dylan has actually definitely come across as being a really good harmonica player. Do you know what I mean? I love that.
Some of us will know that. I will hold my hands up. Right, I tried to learn the harmonica once, and due to ineptitude and lack of attention, I never really got anywhere with that instrument. So it's not an instrument I see as easy to play. But he's known for playing it his entire career, and I kind of wanted to tear my ears off halfway through it. So yeah, that was a high point / low point for me simultaneously.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Mr. Gibson.
Well, I have a QAC club, 2 firsts tonight actually. A thank you and a gift. Brief over. I'm going to keep this as concise as possible. I was obsessed with Bob Dylan for about 3 years. I've seen him about 15 times. He's the only artist I've seen more than once on the same tour. He is the only artist I've been to like fan things. And it was at one such fan thing when I was there amongst the Bobcats. And for those who don't know what Bobcats are, they're people who've seen him 60 times at minimum. And I've socialized with these people. I've talked to these people and ultimately argued with these people. The last time I saw Dylan on a tube coming back from Brixton. So at one of these fan things, I mean, it was tragic. I was post-metal, completely obsessed. I even bought from a catalogue second-hand shop. I bought like brown suede coat, like off the freewheeling, and I was sort of, you know, walking around thinking I was, you know, in Greenwich Village and stuff. And
Steve,
yeah,
can I just give you so you were saying post metal, just for people who don't know. So you're saying that you got into Dylan as a kind of he was kind of your escape from metal as a metal.
yeah, it's just when metal ended, I was completely and people who knew
What year would this have been?
First time I saw Dylan was Tom Petty, so that'd been like 88, 87, something like that. So it's just when thrash was getting over, you know, and I was just, you know, but people who knew me then will laugh. I mean, you have met people who knew me then, but they're too busy taking the piss out of me for other stuff, probably. But if you bring that up, so anyway, at one of these fan things, it was Robert Sheldon had written a book called Like a Rolling Stone, which is much derided now. But looking into it now, quite derided. But he was speaking, and there was a guy called John Baldy speaking, who I think used to write for Q, but he was and he used to do the Telegraph back pre-internet, back in the days of fanzines. He used to do the Telegraph fanzine, which we all subscribed to, and it's just amazing. And he was speaking, and I was thinking, and Under a Blood Red Sky just come out. And I was thinking, I remember it to this day, and the mindset was like, you know, complete and utter fandom. There must be, you know, every song, there must be something, proper Bobcat, there must be something in every song. And he come on stage, and I thought he's going to explain Under a Blood Red Sky to me. And he said, look, you know, everyone's going on about Wiggle Wiggle. If you don't know that song, look it up. But let's go back in time. And I remember the list of songs. I wrote down Bob Dylan's Blues, I Shall Be Free, Black Clay Blues, Outlaw Blues, On the Road Again. Look them all up. They're all on classic Dylan albums. Yeah, and they're nothing. These songs are nothing. Yeah, all right. They're on vibey albums and surrounded by some of the greatest songs ever written, but standalone, they're nothing. And my fandom kind of popped, and it was a real like good thing to happen to me, John Boy. So anyway, firstly, thank you, Owen, for picking a Dylan thing. So it was nice listening to a bit of Dylan again, because I've lived through him, you know. So it's nice to listen to a bit of Dylan. Not this particular album, but it got me to listen to a bit of Dylan again. And I went and got you a copy of John Baldy's book. If you're having a Bob face, you need this book because it's full of interviews with session guys, roadies, people you don't particularly like, and the bloke who's trying to teach him art. There's an interview. There's a quick interview, like a couple of paragraphs from a lady who was on, I think, one of the Christian album sessions. It was saying she was trying to do her backing vocals, and Bob was in the control room saying, no, sing it like this, sing it like this. And after half an hour, she was bent double doing the worst Bob Dylan impression ever. And he went, yeah, that's it, that's the one. So it's a tape. So it's full of stuff like this. And the interesting thing is, Bob's Christian period, he kind of lets Bob do the talking, because there's just to put this into context for everybody, at the root of this is a hot actress, as there always is. He met this wonderfully hot black actress, and her father owned a church. And there's an interview with him in here. It's like sort of, oh my God, we can't believe Dylan's spreading the word, blah, blah, blah. And but there's an interview with her, interview with him, interview with her dad. And then the rest of it is the rest of the paragraph on this period. It's just audience transcripts from the concerts at that time. And it's proper end of the road, end is nice stuff. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Chinese are going to take over everything. You know, it's completely psycho. So the other thing I should say as well is I was sent to a religious school, and it's just, and I noticed it. We'll now rarely bump into people I was at school with, because it wasn't a catchment area thing, and we were sort of busting from all over the city to be sadistically beaten by these people. And when I occasionally bump into, everybody's looked into religion in a very different way to most other people I know look into it. And more of that later when we come to getting around to the album. But thank you, Owen. It's been nice to listen to a bit Dylan again, and give me your address and I'll send you this book because you need it.
Very
Cheers,
good.
dude.
Very good.
But Steve, you haven't told us whether you like the album or not.
No, we're coming to that.
Do that.
Right,
next round. Next round.
Cool. Fine.
Next round.
He's pacing himself.
Plenty
Fair
more
enough.
to say. Yeah.
So
I'll take notes from you.
I suppose I'm quite similar to Steve in that I am as well a big Bob Dylan fan. I've seen him 5 times. I've got this album on CD. I haven't listened to it for probably 20 years. I got into him post metal, probably sort of mid to late 90s, and it was the Biograph that got me into him. The Biograph, which is kind of a 3 CD, 4 CD box set, which was beautifully it was a fantastic selection of his whole career, the Christian stuff. It was just a brilliantly created collection of, you didn't just get the early stuff and then it wasn't chronological. It just cut really beautifully, and that was like a mind thing for me, because same as Marcus, I didn't used to like his voice a little bit. I was intimidated by the history, by the cultural blah blah blah, and it was just a massive, it was a game changer for me. So that I remember being in Switzerland for work and buying Biograph and having the old CD Walkman and playing on a train going through the Alps, thinking, just having my mind completely blown, and that was very much it for me. It was the same as Steve. I just like went out and bought, as you had to in those days, right? I bought like, I think I've got pretty much every album. I think the last one, the last CD album I didn't buy was his Show Tunes one, Shadows in the Night, was it called? Embarrassingly recently, do you know what I mean? So I've got just shelves of Dylan CDs that just don't listen to anymore, like, you know. So I'm a big fan of the Christian period, although this is my least listened to because of just the cover. The cover is so terrible. It kind of the first one is the one not for produced, Slow Train Coming, which has got You've Got to Serve Somebody, which is uber dry existential shuffle. It's just fantastic, and the sound of that record is wonderful. I like the third Christian album, Short of Love, just because it's got Every Grain of Sand on it, and it's just. But I didn't really know this one because it didn't have a big hit. I knew the song Solid Rock, which is on Biograph, which is fantastic. To me, it's the best song on the album, probably because it's the first song I knew. But there are two kind of, you'd say, rock songs in this, right? It's the title track Saved and Solid Rock. So for me, I thought I knew this album when Owen mentioned it, and I thought, oh yeah, I know this album. But going back, I really didn't. I knew the kind of first couple of songs. I knew, the singles, I suppose. But when we're doing something like this, you kind of have to give an album a proper listen. And immersing myself in it for the last couple of days, I've just found it completely magnificent. It's certainly the most cohesive of the Christian records. He just obviously was like, right, I'm just going to make a gospel album. If you listen to Slow Train Coming, it's quite pointed. He sounds a bit bitter. He sounds a bit, I'm trying to make a point. This has happened to me.
Preaching.
Yeah, a bit. There's a bit of a sort of, I don't know. There's sand in machinery. It just sounds a little bit, but it's great. The production's really great. It just works. Whereas this one is just a kind of gospel voices, joy, this incredible organ. A lot of the organ, because of course he recorded everything live. Everything is just mistakes and all. There's loads of organ mistakes all the way through. Just let it roll. It's just I just find it fantastic. And the songwriting, none of the songs, the only songs you might think, oh, these songs are just kind of standards, gospel standards, 1-4-5s, whatever, but they're not. There's stuff like Covenant Women and In the Garden. There's super complex songwriting here, and it sounds gospelly to me. And I think Dylan sounds really vulnerable. He's not hiding behind persona here. He's not trying to be clever. He's just like, who knows why? I mean, it was probably women. Usually, Bob, it's women. They kind of tend to kind of drive his life. They still do, it seems. But to me, there's something pure and vulnerable and joyous in this all the way through, and I loved every second of it, and it really rewards repeat listening to me. It's like I've listened to this the last couple of days through, and and also another thing. So I'll stop talking. I'm going on a bit, but there's I don't know if you know, I mean, Gibson, you know this, but every now and again, Columbia, Universal, they released this outtakes Dylan series, the bootleg series, and there's a bootleg series number 13, which covers this period. Came out in 2017, I think. So it kind of covers Slow Train Coming, this one, and Short of Love, and it's an 8 CD, almost entirely live, and it's really, I've listened to that a lot today, and it's really cool. But the funniest thing about it is, I've got it now on my Spotify on my phone while I'm doing this, is that virtually the entire 8 CD box set is songs from these 3 albums, right? Apart from CD 8, right? CD 8 is live in London, and in CD 8 he plays Slow Train Coming, he plays like Solid Rock, and then he plays Mr. Tambourine Man, and you can just hear the audience going, oh, they just go, oh my god, he's playing just like a woman, and you can hear the audience go, oh, he plays sorry, and you can see he's like, oh, there's something happens when I play this stuff, and it's just so lovely because it's all great, but after 7 CDs of it, it's like, fuck it out. But you can see him coming back into the kind of you know, the secular world, and of course he went back to being a, you know, Judaism with infidels and so on. So I was this was an absolute joy for me, like you, Owen.
Yeah.
So Owen, it's your turn to speak again. Do you want to say a bit more?
Well, yeah. Well, it's interesting, isn't it, what you said about the fact that he is sort of really sort of open and somehow honest in his delivery and in his lyrical content, or there's something kind of not veiled about him in a way that he often is somehow. I mean, if you listen to Blood on the Tracks, right, this is supposedly you know, the album about the disintegration of his marriage. Even on that album, there is a kind of sense that it could be happening to some other person, and who is being kind of dissected by this brilliant, you know, singer-songwriter. Here, it is clearly about him, and it is clearly about something that has happened to him. There's a quote. So he said, Dylan says, "You only tell the truth when you're wearing a mask," and he apparently said that, I think, to Scorsese during the Rolling Thunder tour, where they all wore a mask, and it was basically summed up his whole attitude to his art. You know, you adopt a mask, and that's when you are able to tell the truth somehow. And yet here, it doesn't, unless you take, and some people have said this, unless you take the whole idea, like Keith Richards, who doesn't believe a word of it, unless you take the whole idea of the born-again Christian period as a kind of a strategic kind of play in his career, then this is his most honest album in lots of ways. What's really interesting is that he ended up marrying Carolyn Dennis, one of the backing singers, and I wonder whether that's what Covenant Woman is all about. Which is, just by the way,
it's about
that's about the actress, is it? Okay, actress, fine.
Yeah.
All right. But that song is just, I mean, there are little moments when you think this could be sung by George Harrison. There's just a sweetness to it, and just a very kind of straightforward, beautiful kind of attitude. It's just a glorious song. In the Garden, Seb, you're absolutely right. The key changes in that album are just the most complex but interesting and riveting song musically that he's one of them that he's done for,
harmonically.
Amazing.
He doesn't usually rely on interesting harmonic changes.
No.
Also, the personality, and I agree. I think George Harrison is a very good call. I felt George vibes throughout this.
Yeah. And it's really interesting, isn't it? So when George Harrison had his, you know, he has, you know, when he's My Sweet Lord and all the rest of it, you know, he has his kind of religious awakening sort of towards the end of the Beatles and onwards, you know, we sort of take it as read. But of course, right the way through that sort of period, the idea of sort of holding a Bible as you wandered around, also being a hippie, was completely fine. It's later on that it became sort of deemed to be slightly suspect, and from a particular quarter. So it's just, I mean, it's a much bigger conversation, but it is really interesting, the fact that he had this kind of conversion from where he was at before. As I said before, this kind of you know, the New York kid who's taken all his baggage into that kind of East Coast environment and has developed this very sort of wry, skeptical, brilliant voice, hard-edged, quite cool, to suddenly just throw it all off and just become this very passionate, sort of straight ahead kind of, you know, Christian guy. It's a really interesting story. And then the fact that he threw it off fairly quickly again in itself is interesting. But you know, each individual song, right? So yeah, the opening song, Satisfied Mind, I mean, it's a cover done loads and loads of times, and I think he does it really well. He does it, you know, as a statement of intent. This is the gospel album I'm going to make, and it's glorious and saved. The title track it's just amazing. Just the way that band play, I think it's phenomenal. There's a great YouTube video. I don't know if anybody's seen it. I think of him, I think in 81 or 19, I can't remember. and the band are just going full pelt, and it's just wonderful to watch. The backing singers are just having the time of their life. And I'll send it to you because it's well worth a watch. It's a very grainy video, but it's just a, you know, exactly the way you imagine that song to be played live. So yeah, love that. What else we got? We got Covenant Woman, as I say, that's just glorious, sweet song, lovely. What Can I Do For You? The harmonica. I mean, sorry, Steve, I love the harmonica in that. I just thought that was fantastic. Put through a little fuzz box, wonderful.
Oh,
hello.
Sorry to interrupt again. I feel Marcus is being underrepresented in this. Marcus, were you aware of the two quite lengthy harmonica solos in What Can I Do For You, and what were your thoughts on them?
Well, I just made very brief notes on what Can I Do For You, which I felt the best bit were the two bass guitar notes where right at the start, and then the third one is beat one of the song, and then I completely lost interest after that. I just thought that was an interesting start to it. The rest of it was meh, you know, absolutely nothing. Did zero for me. The harmonica initially, yes, I started criticizing and I thought, oh, well, it's Dylan. He plays crap harmonica, so you know that doesn't matter. Let that roll through. Covenant Woman, I just thought was unbelievably cliched. Like, could be any one of 100 sort of ballady type things, the late 70s. I'm getting a bit cross now.
Loving it, loving the work.
Oh, that era, you know, there was all the stuff, the rim shots, the snare rim shots. Is there a solo coming up? Oh, yes, it's on the organ. Oh, who'd have thought? Oh, it's another organ solo. You know, and then there's, sorry to get slightly technical here, but the sound of the snare drum, I was thinking of a biscuit tin full of gravel. It had this awful kind of thing going on. Then we start coming to the other stuff. Oh, In the Garden. I mean, what a disaster. The lyrics in that song, reminds me of a kind of Sunday school thing. And I've actually worked out what the song is. It's one of the kind of Sunday school Christian things. I was cold, I was naked. Were you there? Were you there? I don't know if anybody remembers that one, right? It's just the same type of melody, the same kind of structure of repeated words. You know, he's stolen a kind of children's Christian song and claimed it as his own. And then he comes out with lines like, when he healed the blind little cripple, did they see? I mean, the blind little cripple. I know this was 1980, but really,
but Marcus, you know, this is the tradition of gospel music, right? It's kind of Christian mythology delivered with big, beautiful gospel vibes, right?
Oh, but do it well. I mean, execute, for goodness sake.
Marcus, I would posit, right, that what we were just talking about harmonically, the two songs you talk about, Covenant Woman and In the Garden, they're structurally, they're fantastic, and lyrically,
yeah.
Of course, it's all, oh Jesus, that's what you do, but they're beguilingly like that. I know what you mean. You could say, I mean, anything Christian, anything dogmatically spiritual, you could say, oh, well, that's fucking Harry, you know, it's My Sweet Lord, Harry Krishna, my sweet Lord. It's like, well, fucking that's just how you're saying Harry Krishna 65 times. Why is that number one? You know, but it's about using mantra, using mythology as a kind of transcendental thing, and that's what he's clearly doing here, right?
Raise the quality, I say. Try harder. Get some good words in here. Don't just rip off Sunday school songs, Bob. You know, poor, I say. Actually, I will, you know, give credit for the key changes. Those got my attention. I thought, this is clever stuff going on here. Starting to get a bit of inventiveness, creativity, but terrible. Saving Grace, I've just put nothing can save for this song. And then I was just had enough. My real question is, he's on tour at the moment. How many of these songs have made it through to the 2024 set list? Probably a big round number is my guess.
Well, but then again, you know, there are so many of his songs that the high likelihood that none of his songs will ever make it. But, I mean, it's not a very high bar.
So Steve Webster, as somebody who probably comes down on the same sort of side of things as Marcus here, would you like to add to the vitriol, just so that you know?
I've not got an awful lot more to say, really. And you know, I do feel almost as if I'm missing the trick here. because there are some very respected views around the room that you know I always pay a lot of attention to, but I don't see that complexity. I don't see the. I mean, Covenant Woman, for example. Now, my notes on that were elements of the sort of beautiful Van Morrison type stuff, but it's exactly the same sort of, oh shit, there's another verse that I've associated with most of his work.
Webster.
Yeah.
Can I ask, not in any sort of, can I just genuinely, objectively, just genuinely wondering, how many times did you listen to it?
3 times.
Okay.
I only made notes once.
Kind of to make its mark.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I don't feel it would grow. I don't feel it grow. But I think that's okay. I think it just doesn't hook me in at all. And I found myself, I think the biggest thing for me was I was looking for something lyrically that wasn't there. And I think it's, that I've said this already, but that saves a lot of his work for me is the intelligence of the lyrics. And I think he's kind of hamstrung with this, that yes, there is just a certain amount of mantra. But I mean, I'm thinking of pressing on was a song I particularly didn't like, but then there was this whole bit. He starts to talk about people say to me, prove to me he's the Lord, show me a sign. What kind of sign do they need when it all comes from within? And there's not even anything there. If he's starting to tell his own story, which I got the sense that he was, it's like, well, yeah, but you've just got to believe. Well, I don't know, give us something, make something up, pretend something happened, or give me a bit more than.
That's what gospel music is. You're preaching.
Yes, I know, but
what do you expect? The conclusion: you will find God on floor 64 in room 2B.
Yes, to be fair, so you just read some of the stage transcripts. He nearly says that. So
brilliant. The live stuff. It's the only time he's ever spoken between songs.
Yes.
The song banter on that 8 CD box set is fantastic. It's fantastic.
One of the things that did lift me up, right, the last song, I thought that was great. Are You Ready? I actually thought it was really cleverly placed because it kind of ends the album very suddenly. And it leaves that question there. Now the answer for me is no, I'm not, thanks. But I thought that was really cleverly put into place. I like that, and I love the gospel singers. They will, that kind of sound will lift anything. We go back to talking about the the Humble Pie album months ago, whenever we reviewed that. You can't not like that. You have to have an absolute heart of stone to not enjoy that. But that was as high as it got for me, really.
Thank you, Mr. Gibson. You've given us your general Dylan context. Re-listening to Saved now, what were your thoughts? Obviously not your. We've had your kind of historical context.
Yeah. I'm gonna, but it's an interesting one because I'm not gonna waffle on about the songs too much. When I was collecting the Dylan stuff, it was pre everything, so I was trying to get as much as I can secondhand. Obviously, your freewheeling, they never secondhand. So there was a fantastic record shop called Weasels in Southampton. I used to go in there. The guy was a massive bobhead, and he noticed me buying, what I had secondhand. And he said, "Oh, get it." And I gave him about 10 C90s. He did a load of. It's all out now on the aforementioned bootleg series, but all that stuff. This is back in the 80s. He gave it to me, recorded it from brilliant. So anyway, I was in there one day and I picked up Slow Train Coming, and he said to me, "Oh, this is this Christian period." I went, "Well, I've heard of it." Yeah, he said, he goes, "I'll tell you what, I can't shift the 3 of these. I'll get off, have all 3 of them. I can't shift them." And that's probably the best review I can really make of it. Let's be honest. It's only now that music's free that you get all this. Oh look back in time, isn't it? Wasn't it amazing? Whereas at the time, if you had to fork out your hard earned, perhaps it wasn't that great.
Well, that's the really interesting thing is that the Slow Train Coming was actually a huge hit, but then this wasn't.
It was a huge hit because of his fan base, And if you speak to these people as I've done, that they are people who will. I'm sure. I mean, you've all had obsessions, and you speak to these people's fans of. I'm sure Springsteen's got them. Whoever's got them, and you feel like saying, "For fuck's sake, just go and see someone else." Please just go and see some other music. Jesus Christ. You're putting too much pressure on the man.
Yeah.
But no, in all honesty, Saved, I it's half-assed. It's, you know, it's someone droning on about Jesus. I can't be arsed with it because of my past. I can't stomach it. I really can't. I've heard enough about that. The music, you go on about the gospel stuff. I know nothing about gospel music, but I did actually I've been listening to some gospel music on Spotify this week to try and get my head around it. And there's a bit that, you know, I'm sure on your various instruments, there's a big thing, you know, on my Instagram, there's always church drummers playing gospel music. And there's not even a I can't detect any of the spirit that I hear from proper gospel music in what Dylan tried to do there. Positively,
I thought the drumming on this was fantastic. I thought the drumming.
Yeah, the drum's great. Isn't it?
sorry, I've not got to the drummer yet. I've not got to Mr. Jim Keltner, who's in my top 3 drummers. Let me get everyone else has had about 20 minutes to speak. I get shouted down. I've actually got something to say about the album. So I'm very much with Marcus and Steve, really. I think they've seen through it. I think they've seen through the 3 big songs from these 3 albums. And In the Garden is the one that all the Bobcats are like, oh my God, we've still got him. They're still clinging on to it till Blood on the Tracks came out. And it is cheesy. I don't see anything. I mean, the very least I would expect is something from Dylan. Bearing in mind how much he meant to me and how much I love the previous albums, I would expect, as Steve said, to hear something to like, yeah, maybe getting beaten by those monks was worth it. Maybe there is something in it, but I don't get any of it. It's cheesy. It's cheesy nonsense. And the only positives are Jim Keltner. I wouldn't listen to the album again, and the fact that it's probably, when you look at Dylan's life, it's impossible to imagine being him and what he's gone through and the way people think of him and the pressure that's put on him every time he does anything. It probably something he had to go through that we ended up with Infidels and Blood on the Tracks and the rest of it. So that's the 2 positives to me. It's rubbish. The 3 albums are dreadful, cheesy, dreadful. You know,
Not even, you know, like Every Grain of Sand.
No, it's cheesy as fuck. If anyone else had written that, it'd be laughed out of court. You know.
Groom Still Waiting at the Altar.
That's not on. What was that on?
That's on Shot of Love.
That's on Shot of Love. Yeah. No, I like the live. There's a live version that I quite like. It's on Biograph. There's a live version that was all right, but not. I can live without them. I can live without them totally. You know, I don't care what you can be. I don't care if you're Bob Dylan or someone with an odd pair of shoes on the corner with a, you know, Yendy's Night banner on. It doesn't matter. You're talking nonsense as far as I'm concerned. I've got the scar to prove it. So, you know,
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Very good, Owen.
Well, I mean, that cuts to the core of it, isn't it? I mean, there is this debate. Well, some people either have the debate or they don't. But the point is that what he's mining here is basically it's the stuff that goes back 2,000 years, right? And it's the stuff that has run like a seam of rock through the entire Western culture, right? So you're criticizing what he's, so for instance, In the Garden, right? Garden of Gethsemane and all the rest of it. I mean, you know, Shakespeare, for instance, basically references that as a key artistic line or an image in so many different sort of ways throughout his work, and so is Bob Dylan. And so do many people.
There's 2 different. Shakespeare's time, they thought of religion very differently. To
no, for sure. But what I'm saying is that it's just it's on that continuum.
Yeah, it's on the.
Which is why, because I mean, when I first approached it, and I was thinking, not really sort of understanding it, I sort of took the view from a point of ignorance by just saying, well, no, I'm not suggesting you're ignorant. I'm just saying that from my ignorance of Bob Dylan's oeuvre, that it was just a cheap sort of play by somebody who'd lost the plot and not actually what it was, which I think is a kind of sort of a continuing sort of artistic journey from somebody who, you know, started off in the early 60s. I mean, the first Bob Dylan album is basically a bunch of covers of, you know, classic folk songs that cross the Atlantic and the Delta blues and all the rest of it. It's on that continuum that goes all the way through, and let's face it, all the way through. I mean, John Wesley Harding, for instance, is a deeply religious album, but it's using kind of Old Testament religious iconography. And then likewise, Blood on the Tracks has a ton of religious sort of references. It is deep within his DNA, as a kind of a singer-songwriter. And actually, when you look at it that way, what's the only thing that actually sets it apart from his other work in that sense is the fact that it's, as I was saying before, it's very direct. There's no kind of mask here, but actually it makes perfect sense lyrically and thematically in terms of what he started at and what he's still doing now. You know,
I think I'm in the you had a funny 5 minutes camp, but you know.
Owen, I completely agree with you. I think that's extremely succinct. I think it's a real mistake and a shame to perceive this and its two colleagues as some sort of step down or failure in any way. He was just, if you listen to Street Legal, the one before Slow Train Coming, he's floundering a bit. He's if you look at the cover, standing on a street corner looking confused, which is kind of what you hear inside. He's kind of, so obviously the stars aligned with the actress and whatever, and the music, and of course late 70s born again Christian evangelism was a big thing. He was caught up in it, and I think he perhaps saw an opportunity, saw a musical thing, saw something. But it's still, to me, what I really got out of this, because I you know, the calcified perception of Dylan points in his life, and you know, Desire and Hurricane and all this, and where people get on and off and all this sort of stuff. We all know this general narrative. But what I particularly enjoyed about this is, for me, exactly what you're saying, Owen. To me, this is this is just as good to me as something like John Wesley Harding, or perhaps something on the tracks. But to me, this isn't a kind of just a genre piece. You know, it sounds like it might be a genre piece because it's gospel and it's like, oh, Jesus and da, 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 and oh yeah, I want the Lord, all this sort of stuff. The cliches, I suppose, the music cliches. But I do think that it transcends all that. It is still a fantastic Bob Dylan album. And Marcus, you're saying voice is terrible voice. Voices are so subjective. I mean, obviously, you listen to Aretha Franklin doing, you know, a gospel song, and it's amazing. Her voice soars. It's just, oh God, the voice is part of this perfect harmony of whatever. But Bob's just, I love his voice. I don't get all the stuff about having a bad voice. He's got this gritty, incredibly expressive voice. He sings beautifully on this. I think he sings wonderfully on this. I think just because he doesn't sound like, I don't know, fucking Michael Ball or something, I don't know. I disagree with that wholeheartedly.
But what's interesting about that,
you had the whole world to go after there, and you
but that if he had he one of his best albums, actually, which I love, I just got into recently, is Nashville Skyline, which he did with Johnny Cash, right? And he's a big Johnny Cash fan.
One song with Johnny Cash.
No, absolutely. Sorry, yeah. So he the one song with Johnny Cash, and then I think he did a whole load of other sessions, didn't he, with him? And then that was the one song that ended up on that album. But if he had actually done this album with Johnny Cash, I do wonder whether it would have actually received a little bit more credibility because of where Johnny Cash is in the American sort of universe, of cultural universe. You know what I mean? Because he's so revered as a kind of as a cultural figure in that sort of Christian sense, although he's not an overtly Christian kind of character or a singer, and yet he has sort of occupies that kind of same space. So I think he definitely should have done a duet with Johnny Cash on this album, without a doubt.
I suppose there's also, again with Dylan, there's a sort of there have been perceived issues of authenticity with this, you know, as a British man suddenly being a and really, you know, and America being a deeply Christian country, and of course when he toured this, he wouldn't play anything. And he, you know, when he for these 3 albums, he would only play songs from his Christian period, and a lot of gigs were very chaotic because of that. Anyway, does anybody have anything else to say before we start doing scores and going on to the next record? Marcus,
I just wanted to sum up and give me score. That's what I was going to say. But,
let's start with you then, Steve.
Basically, my favourite Bob Dylan joke is that he was. You look at Dylan, undoubted genius, complete undoubted genius. We all know that. A guitar, a harmonica around his neck, genius. Now, if you put 2 cymbals between his knees, all of a sudden, it's a very different story. And I think he put the cymbals between his knees for this one. And the rhythm. So I'm giving it 5 out of 10. That's for Jim Keltner and for where 5 out of 100. Sorry, that's for Jim
Hang on.
Keltner from where it took it.
Do you mean 50 out of 100 or 5 out of 100?
5.
Crushing.
Sorry, I interrupted you mid-flow just because I was numerically concerned.
No, that's all I've got. That's all I've got. So I'm done. I'm done.
Oh. Mr. Webster.
I'll keep it very brief. I've got a holiday booked in the end of October. So Devil Has All the Best Tunes, 13 out of 100.
Good point.
Marcus.
At 19 out of 100.
Ooh. That's fair.
No summings up. We've got a bit of catty comment from Webster. Nothing at all from Marcus. Owen, a little bit of a summing up, or just give me a score. Don't care.
Yeah, I was.
No, don't know it. Just come on.
usually surprised by it,
Please.
and I loved it. So I'm gonna. But it's the difference between a general score of music or a general score of Bob Dylan. I don't know. I mean, but comparatively, who knows? I give it, say, 65.
Okay, I'm giving it 74. It's my favourite one so far by miles. I really liked it, and I'm just trying to find the calculator on my phone to do. Has anyone got a calculator handy so I can do the aggregate scores?
Yeah.
Yeah, you do. Okay, so it's Gibson 5.
Yeah.
Webster 13. Marcus 19.
Yeah.
Owen 65. Me 74. What does that give us?
A mean score of 35.2.
Jeez. So that 35.2, that's worse than Tin Machine.
Is it?
Wow.
Whoa.
But slightly better than Kip Winger. So
What?
I think that's what he would have wanted.
The Lord has spoken. Yeah.
Hallelujah.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Gibson, it's your turn next. What you thought?
I've picked an album I've always wanted to listen to, but been too scared to. I've no idea how you will feel about this band or the genre. It's an album called Drama by Yes, or should I say the Yuggles, because it's the one where Rick Wakeman and John Anderson had left, and they got Trevor Horn fresh from Video Killed the Radio Star.
Wow.
The other guy in. So there was a lot of loon. There was a lot of flailing of loon pants apparently, and shouting at gigs when they turned up. So I've always wanted to hear it. Been too scared. Thought this is a good opportunity. So
I think that's a wonderful choice. I don't know it. It's Trevor Rabin.
yes, yeah. Trevor Horn.
Trevor Horn, Trevor Rabin.
Yeah.
Trevor Horn was singing, wasn't he? Because
Yeah, and then who was the other guy from the Buggles came as well. What's his name? Keyboard player to replace Rick Wakeman.
I don't know.
Yeah, but anyway,
I thought Buckles was just Trevor Horn.
no, there's another guy. Yeah, so,
Wow. Okay.
yeah.
Does anybody know it?
No.
Not a sausage.
So, well, that's that then. I think we can wind up.
You'll hate me now. Do you not like? Yes. Are you worried about 20-minute songs about oceans and stuff? Because I am.
That's what I'm looking forward to.
I know Yes up until Tales from Topographic. I know. I love the early stuff. I absolutely love it. So, but I don't know this.
There we are.
Any Yes fans? Among you?
Yeah, I'm a huge early Yes fan. Yeah. And I like the 90125 and all that stuff. So.
I like that too.
Yeah.
Owner of a Lonely Heart. Cracking song.
That's great.
Cracking.
Good. Right. In that case, I think that's it. Because this probably looks like it's worked and it looks like it's still recording. Can you please subscribe? So it's going on YouTube, isn't it? So we need to sort out a YouTube channel and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, there's a bit to do, but we'll sort it. That's okay.
Hello YouTube. Hello all platforms. Right. Well, thanks everybody. This has been quite a long one.
Owen, don't forget to put your address on the WhatsApp so I can send you this.
Done. Cheers, dude. Looking forward to it.
All right. Thanks everybody, and amen.
Good night.
Bye.
Adios.
Questionable.